Today, we need to talk about why sometimes things get worse before they get better when you're manifesting. I have addressed this subject before, but it's time to address it again because I have a new way of talking about it, and I also have a personal success story of mine that will really illustrate to you what I'm talking about when it comes to this topic of things getting worse before they get better. You guys seem to really benefit and relate to the personal stories I tell you, so it felt very important to me that I incorporate this into this video, and you will get this even deeper. You're gonna trust yourself even more, and you're gonna stop freaking out over your emotions. That is one of my biggest goals as your manifestation coach, is to get you to stop pandering to your emotions. Stop letting your mindset shift because you had a physical sensation of an emotion. We got to stop doing that. And today, the way I explain things is really going to drive that home for you. But before we get into all of that, I will introduce myself to any of you who might not know me yet. My name is Genevieve. I'm a manifestation coach. And as a lot of people in the comments say, which I love, I am one of the realest coaches out there. I try to really get into the nitty gritty and talk about real life human stuff and not just keep manifestation on this sort of like airy-fairy, illogical place. Though there are always going to be parts of manifestation that are illogical, I try to apply it in a more human way that doesn't feel like it's gaslighting you. Because I feel like when I first learned about manifesting, I felt like a lot of it was just like gaslighting me. Like, oh, just pretend everything's fine and just keep moving on. Just ignore everything and just keep affirming. And it made me feel like I had to suppress my emotions and all of that. And so this is a big thing we're going to get into today, so I won't get ahead of myself. But anyway, I am the kind of coach here that I try to go in depth with you. So if you want to work with me more, there are all kinds of ways to do that in the links below. You can do a one-on-one session with me. You can do courses. There's 3 different courses available at the moment down there. There's membership portions of this channel. There's different levels of membership though, so make sure you pay attention to that when you sign up. And yeah, just check out all the links. But I think that's it. Let's get into this topic. So remember, the topic of the day is, why do things sometimes get worse before they get better when manifesting? And when I say things, I mean both circumstances, but also your emotions. I can't tell you how many comments I've seen on videos on this channel from people who are saying things like, I'm so mad I ever discovered manifesting because everything got worse when I started manifesting, and I felt more anxious, I felt more sad, I felt blah, 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 like all of that stuff. And my heart goes out to these people because that is to be expected for a lot of you. Things are going to get worse for a lot of you when you start manifesting, and that's unfortunately not really talked about in the manifesting community. And that could be because a lot of people talking about manifesting don't know about this part of it, or it's just because they try to gloss it over and just focus on the positive and don't look at the negative. But I found in my own experience that if I'm not mentally prepared for things getting worse before they get better when I'm manifesting, I'm not going to follow through on my manifestation. Because for me, as a newcomer or someone who's new at manifesting, if I am trying to manifest and I'm trying to apply it and I see that, oh my gosh, things are actually suddenly worse, I feel worse, my circumstances look worse, I'm going to give this up. I am not going to keep doing this. This is obviously bad. Manifesting is obviously bad. That's what I would think, because nobody in manifesting world, not even Neville Goddard himself, like ever really talked about this, that sometimes things get worse before they get better. But if someone had really broken that down to me and told me that it's like a scientific part of this process, that for a lot of things, especially things that I am very resistant to, that those things will probably start to trigger me even more before they get better. If someone had explained that to me and I could have mentally prepared myself for, like, oh, it's a normal part of the process, that I'm gonna feel worse, that my circumstances are gonna get worse before things get better, I could have saved myself a lot of struggle and self-sabotage through this process. So that's why now, as the coach that I am, I wanna talk about these things with you so that you aren't just blindly like, oh, I affirmed that my life is amazing, but then everything got worse. So let's get into my personal story that I just went through about this very topic. And I'm telling you the story as a mirror to you so that you kind of get like a real world example. And I'll start by saying this is kind of an odd example maybe, because in all of the hundreds of clients that I've worked with, I've never had a client bring this circumstance to me, But it doesn't matter, it's just a circumstance, and after I tell you the story, I will explain how it still applies to you, even if you don't relate to this particular circumstance. But the circumstance is that I have had a lifelong fear of flying. And when I learned about manifestation, I was like, oh, of course I can apply manifestation to flying. I'm just going to affirm that I love flying, that being in a plane is like my favorite thing ever. And I love flying in by plane. And I was using all these affirmations that were all about I love traveling. And I've always naturally loved traveling. And that's partly why this fear of flying in me has really been a big inner conflict for me, because I love to travel. I love going new places. I love meeting new people. I love being in the world. But I just don't like being in an airplane. Or I should say, I didn't like being in an airplane. Now we finally manifested a new result. But for a long time in my life, I was really uncomfortable with flying. I still would. For a lot of my adult life, I really kind of would force myself to buckle through it. And for a period of my adult life, especially my 20s when I was traveling a lot, I did almost totally get over the fear of flying, but not fully, but like almost totally got over the fear of flying. But then COVID happened in 2020. I stopped traveling. And I think because I stopped traveling for a while, that fear just sort of naturally became the default setting in my brain again, because I was no longer used to flying. So that's a little bit of the background context of this. So I discover manifestation. I'm affirming that I love flying, that I love being in the plane. And at first, I really felt like it was working. I remember when I was first affirming, I actually got a call from my uncle to go pick him up from the airport, which is kind of random because this isn't an uncle that I'm super, super close with. So I thought, oh, I must have manifested this because I've been affirming that I love flying. And then I get a call from my uncle asking me to come to the airport. So of course it's like I'm being led to the airport. And when I was there at that time, I remember seeing the planes and I didn't feel any fear. Just seeing the plane, I was like, oh my gosh, I can see them. I'm seeing them take off and fly around and I'm just excited. I don't feel any fear. So I, at that time, egoically was like, okay, cool, this is obviously working because yeah, it's just clearly working. And technically I was not wrong, it was working, but I did not have myself prepared for what was gonna happen next. I had been affirming this off and on for months. I hadn't been super focused on this, but it was something that occasionally, I was affirming how much I love flying, blah, blah, blah. And so then I have a trip coming up. I'm gonna take a plane to Florida. I get on the plane. The flight there was like kind of okay, but also really not. And that was when I first was like noticing like, wow, I'm like still really uncomfortable. And I was bothered by my botheredness. And remember, this is gonna be a key thing that we talk about later. But I'm on the flight there. It was still okay, but I was like not really okay. So anyway, we're there. Then I come back home from Florida and the flight back home from Florida was horrendous. I was more anxious on that flight than I had been in a long time. Like I can't even describe it. And then of course I manifested that it had to be an even longer flight because the pilot, being a good pilot, had to like fly down around a storm. And so I like added like an hour to our trip. And so I was like, oh my God, get me out of this plane. And I had no idea why. I was like weirdly even more anxious than I had ever been. And there was no logic to it. It was just like the physical sensation of anxiety was just so there. And the more I was anxious, the more I was getting really bothered by my anxiety. And I felt like, oh my God, something's really wrong with me. I totally failed at manifesting that I love flying. Like I was thinking all of these things. And then I was thinking things like, I'm never flying again. And I just hate this. Like, I'm just not going to fly in my life. And my mentality went into total self-sabotage. Like I allowed the feelings of anxiety to completely like capsize my mentality. And I just believed the anxiety. I believed what I thought the anxiety meant. I thought the anxiety meant I'm failing at this. This is clearly not for me. I've messed up manifesting even more. I shouldn't have ever affirmed that I love flying because now I hate it even more than I ever loved it. And it was just like a lot of thoughts like that. And after I got home from that trip, I didn't fly for like a year because I was too afraid to get back on a flight because of how bad that particular experience was. But being the kind of person I am, and remember I told you, I love to travel, and I'm not gonna ever be the kind of person that can just be at home all the time or just do road trips. Like, I'm the kind of person, I wanna go far away. I wanna explore places I've never been before. I need a lifestyle where I can travel and fly freely. So recently, I finally got the chance to book another trip, get on that flight, and go somewhere, because in my mentality, I was like, there's no effing way that I am going to let this weird resurgence of anxiety defeat me. Like, I am not going to let what happened to me on my last flight of feeling anxious determine how I act and how I think of myself and how I identify and how I manifest for myself. I'm not going to let that one experience change the rest of my manifestations when it comes to flying. So I bucked up again, I got on another flight, and I have to tell you, I was anxious for sure. Like, especially after a year of really buying into the old story. The old story for me being that flying is really uncomfortable. I really don't like it. I can't handle it. You know, it's just bad. I was really buying into that old story. And so, of course, when I got on this flight, I was going to be anxious. I was not going to be comfortable. But the thing that really shifted in me long before I got on this flight was I realized that manifesting in general is so mind over matter. Obviously, matter being the 3D, mind being your consciousness, that you're always going to defer to the higher direction of your conscious knowing. You're not going to defer to physical sensations that bother you. If you're constantly trying to pander to and acquiesce to and take care of physical sensations in here, you're always going to be a slave to old story stuff. So I know that. I teach that stuff. So this is also partly why I knew I've got to overcome this. I've got to revisit this thing I started about this manifesting a love for flying. I've got to revisit this and do it in a different way. I have to stick to what I know to be true, and that is if I just stick to my mind and knowing that no matter what happens, no matter how I feel, no matter what happens on that flight, I am going to fly. I was accepting, for that first flight, I was accepting that I became indifferent to needing to like it. And this is also a thing that I'm going to talk about after the story. But I became indifferent to needing to like flying, but instead I was identifying as someone who flies all the time with no problem. And by no problem, I mean that, again, I wasn't going to react to anything within me as if it was a problem. So even if I'm anxious, my mindset is not going to feel that and be like, oh no, this is a problem. This is not good. We got to handle this. I was no longer going to let my mindset do that. So again, I'm on the flight to my destination. I feel anxious, but it was surprisingly easy. I habituated pretty quickly on the flight once we started going. And for those of you who don't know, habituation is a cool thing that your brain does where it goes back to homeostasis after a strong reaction or a strong smell or a strong thing just happened. Your brain doesn't want you to stay in that heightened state. It wants you to go back to homeostasis. So if you have a strong reaction of anxiety, eventually your brain is going to habituate to that circumstance that caused the anxiety, and you're going to feel eventually less calm. Another good example of this that people give is when you walk into a room and there's a really strong smell in that room and you're like, whoa, it smells really strongly like flowers in here. But then after you're in that room for like 10 minutes, you no longer smell the flower smell because your brain habituated to the strong scent of flowers. So this is what habituation means. You can also, unfortunately, habituate sometimes to your affirmations, but that is another tale for another video. But the bottom line is that your brain will start to tune out things that it's used to hearing, and it no longer decides to make sense of it, just starts to tune things out. So anyway, I'm going to try to wrap up this story. So flight there was anxious, but not bad. The flight back, though, I was like enjoying it so much, and I almost like surprised myself how much I was enjoying it, because normally in the past, even during the times in my life that I was flying a lot and was mostly used to it, but was still a little uncomfortable, I still needed stuff to distract me. But my flight back on this recent trip, I was truly enjoying being in the plane. I didn't need to distract myself from the circumstance of being in the plane, and I have no idea why I was suddenly like so comfortable with it. Like I just sat there, I was looking around the plane, I didn't need to distract myself, I just felt comfortable. And it was the first time ever in my life really that I was on a plane that I just felt so at ease, so comfortable, didn't feel this like anxious urge to distract myself. And I was like, wow, this is big, and I have to talk to you guys about this in terms of how this applies to you and everything you're manifesting, even though I know right now it might sound like, okay, how does your fear of flying apply to me manifesting my SP? It absolutely does. Because after this recent flight, when I got back and I was like, whoa, I really liked that flight. I wasn't even planning to like that flight, but I weirdly enjoyed it. I'm excited to fly again now. I was thinking about it and I was like, oh my God, that manifestation that I started years ago, the manifestation that I started where I said, I love flying, I love being on the plane, that manifestation was still working. And when I took that flight to Florida that I told you guys about, and I had a really big purge of anxiety, that was a part of the process. Because a big thing when it comes to manifesting, especially manifesting things that you've had a lot of resistance to, your old stories will purge up. And this is not new to you guys, especially those of you who watch me. I talk about this all the time. Your old stories, especially your old feelings, but also old circumstances can come up. It will purge up, and you are meant to think about that thing that just came up in a different way. So for me, when I was flying back to Florida on that trip a while ago and I was super anxious, I was supposed to be thinking about that anxiety in a different way. I was supposed to be dealing with it in a different way. I was supposed to be practicing more of that mind over matter stuff where I could just feel the anxiety. I wouldn't be resisting the anxiety, because that's what I did on my flight, like the recent one that I told you about where I was flying to the destination. I said I was anxious at first. I was not resisting the anxiety. I was not saying, oh no, I can't feel anxious. Oh no, this is bad that I feel anxious. In fact, I was kind of welcoming it. I was like, yep, I fully anticipated that I would feel uncomfortable, but I'm not going to make it a problem. I'm just going to accept that this is how I feel right now. It is what it is. I still know everything's working out for me and I'm going to have a great time at my destination or whatever. I did a true mind over matter in terms of I knew where I was going. I knew that it was still going to work out amazing. I knew that nothing was going to change my mindset, and I was accepting of my emotions. I wasn't trying to suppress them as if it's like, no, I can't feel this because if I feel this, this means that something bad's going to happen. I wasn't doing that. But that is what I was doing on that flight back from Florida that I talked to you about, where I didn't know how to deal with the anxiety. I was caught off guard by it. I had no mental preparation for like, how do I deal with this? So instead of actually doing a mind over matter, law of assumption, go into my higher consciousness kind of thing, I just got swept away by the feelings and just went totally into the old story of like, yep, this sucks. This doesn't work for me. I can't do this. I'm weak. I failed, blah, blah, blah. I went into all of that. But all I did when I did that at that time on that Florida trip is I just put my manifestation on pause. I just put it on pause. It was always still working, but because I reacted to myself so strongly and I got stuck there for a while, I just put that manifestation that I put in motion on pause. But my manifestation of loving to fly was still freaking working, but I just didn't know. I didn't know to embrace that part of the process, that things are going to challenge me even more so that I can actually get to the final manifestation of enjoying flying. I needed to face my biggest fears. I needed to see them and handle them differently. I needed to feel those old feelings come up and look at them differently, have a different response to them, a different mental response to them. And that is how that old story would die. And then I would get to my new final destination of enjoying flying and liking it and actually being excited about being on a plane and not needing to distract myself. So it was always working all along. And I finally got it on this recent trip when I came back, and I was so surprised even in my own self. It's like, oh wow, I do like this. I was like, oh my God, full circle moment. That manifestation has always been working. I just put it on pause accidentally, and I needed to face my anxiety differently for it to come to its full fruition. So let's talk about you now in terms of how this applies to you, because probably the number one thing I see in so many of you is that you will not stop reacting to the old story. And you probably know this, like you're reacting to your old emotions, you're reacting to old circumstances when they pop up. You are just always taking the bait when you've intended something like, your SP and you are together, your SP loves you, or that you have all this money, whatever it is you're intending that you're manifesting, you've intended that. But the moment anything pops up that looks like it is not that end thing, you are just like, well, this isn't working. This is a problem. This is not good. You are reacting to it as if this is it. It's not working. And every time you do that, you're doing what I did, where you're just putting the pause button on manifesting. You're saying, nope, I'm not actually ready to get the full manifestation. I need to sit here with the old story stuff some more because I need to keep reacting in the old way to the old story. I can't not react this way anymore. I just got to keep reacting. So I'm going to put everything on pause. And so this is what we mean by you are the only one in the way of your manifestation. You are the only thing stalling anything. It's not because the 3D is difficult to change. It's not because your SP is too difficult to change. It's because you will not engage with yourself in the higher way. And I'm saying higher way in terms of like the end way that you've chosen. You need to keep interacting with yourself as if you know without a doubt, no matter what happens, that that end is still happening. So even if you have a day where, this is a drastic example, but that your specific person goes out and gets drunk and cheats on you. That's such a weird example. That probably is something that a few of you are manifesting that I would say that. But that's the example, like the worst thing happens where they are a total dick, they go out and they cheat on you and blah, blah, blah. And you are just like, yep, there's no overcoming this. This is the worst thing that could have happened. This was my worst fear. We're never gonna recover from this. This is over. That is like me on that Florida flight, being anxious and saying, yep, because I feel this way, because this is happening where I'm stuck on this flight and it's horrible, I can never do this again. This isn't working. And I just put everything on pause. You cannot react to it in that way. You're gonna have feelings about it. And that's the thing, like I was saying before about my own anxiety, you're gonna have feelings about it. When your SP gets drunk and cheats on you or whatever, you're gonna feel feelings. Of course you are. And it would be weird if you were like trying to suppress that and be like, oh, I don't see that. I'm just gonna ignore that and pretend to be positive. That's a weird way to react to that. That's just suppressing. And I guarantee anyone who's trying to manifest in that way of just pretending to ignore, like, oh, I just don't feel it and I don't see it happening. You are in so much denial. You are in fearful avoidance and you are absolutely not manifesting anything good right now. So instead, it's like accepting that's like, okay, ow, this hurts. This is not, didn't see this one coming. This came out of left field. Did not see this coming. Do not like it. This is the worst thing that could have happened. But of course, the way manifesting tends to work, when I have a big purge, the purge tends to be my worst fear. My worst fear starts happening because the purge is, worst fear happens, you respond in a different way to it. And in that example that I just gave, the way your higher knowing is responding is you're responding as in, this doesn't matter. We're still gonna have an amazing life together eventually. We're still gonna get married and do whatever the heck I've got planned together. It's like with my plane example, even though I was going through the initial horrible circumstance of feeling really anxious, feeling like I was maybe gonna die, getting on that plane and feeling like I wanted to jump off of it, I still, in my mindset, knew my destination. Obviously, in this example, it's like a literal destination because I was flying somewhere, but I knew I'm gonna get there, it's gonna be great, and I don't even care if I feel this way right now. I don't even care what's happening right now. I just don't care. I can accept it and just move through it. So this is what I mean when I say being non-resistant to your current reality, being accepting of it. It's not that I want you to suppress your feelings again, but it's more that you're just gonna accept that, yeah, right now this sucks. Right now, whatever this thing is that just triggered me, it sucks, and I feel really down about it. But I know because scientifically, Genevieve told me the scientific process of manifestation is sometimes with things I'm resistant to, things are gonna challenge me even more. Things are gonna get worse before they get better. And because I know that, I can just buckle down, get through this, and not let this painful thing that's come up change my knowing of my direction. And it takes, again, a lot of mental fortitude to do this. This is why manifesting is a lifelong practice where you learn your own strength over time as you start to trust yourself more, as you get more practice and more of your own sense of how you get results. So trust the process. And please, please stop giving up on yourself when things get hard. So many of you, and again, I get it, but so many of you, you just give up. You totally sabotage when these purges happen, when these things happen, and you allow it to change your mindset, that higher knowing of like, it doesn't matter if this just happened, this is my worst fear. So of course I'm so powerful that I would purge and manifest my worst fear so I can finally face it differently and therefore get over it. But it doesn't matter. It's just purged out. And now, because I know how this scientific process works, this is a part of the process, and I'm still going to where I know my life is going. Because when you give up, when you do what I did, and you just do that little pause of like, oh, things are really bad, I feel really anxious, or I feel really bad, and things look really bad, so I'm done. When you do that, you are pausing yourself in a moment of suffering. You're actually like trapping yourself in that suffering. You're prolonging the suffering because you've just decided, no, this is the end. This suffering right now, this deepening of anxiety or this deepening of worsening circumstances, this is my new end, I've decided, because I'm now attached to this. My other end that I had decided before, I've given up on that. That's done now, because this that just came up, I can't let go of this. This is my new end, and I'm pausing on this, and it's gonna be my new reality. Or I should say my sustained reality, the one that I'm just gonna keep choosing. And that's what I don't want you guys. I don't want you guys to get this impression that manifesting is just gonna ruin your life. It only looks that way because you hit the pause button at the moment that things were getting worse and you didn't trust the process to go all the way through. But it is completely in your power to just unclick that pause button and keep going. Do what I did, where I finally got the mental strength again to be like, you know what? I'm not gonna let this fear, in my case, stop me from doing what I know is so a part of me. It's so a part of me to be a traveler. It is so a part of me to travel around the world, to see the world. It's just a part of who I was put on this earth to be. I cannot let my fear manifest me to not be my higher self. I have to step into my higher consciousness and know that fear is not the end for me. Fear is not going to define my end for me. That fear is going to come up sometimes, especially in that purgy way, but it is not going to distract me anymore. It's not going to take me out of that end, that higher end that I know is who I am, is who I'm meant to be, is what I'm manifesting. I am not going to do that. And it took me some time. I had to stay on that pause button for a while before I was ready to hit the unpause and like get back to it. And the same goes for you. If you're feeling really stalled out on the manifestations in your life that are really important to you, it's on you to decide mind over matter. Let's get back into thinking the correct way. It doesn't matter if you feel bad. It doesn't matter if every day your emotions are screaming at you that you are crazy, that you suck, that you're delusional. It doesn't matter if your old emotions are screaming that at you. You're just not gonna buy into it. They're just like dogs barking in the background. They're just a thing you hear, a noise you hear in the background, but you cannot let it distract you. You are sticking with the higher vision of like, okay, I hear you barking dogs, but I do not care. I know what's happening. I know where I'm going. I know this is working out for me. I'm not giving up on this to like freak out and feed myself to the barking dogs. Whew, okay, this has been a long video, but I know it was helpful for you. I know for so many of you, this was a kick in the butt you really needed maybe. And again, don't be distracted by the flying context of my personal story. Like that same formula that I described applies to everything you're manifesting. And I know that you get that. So don't be distracted by the context of the circumstances, like the circumstances of that thing for me were flying. It does not matter. The same idea of not buying into your fear or not buying into your doubts or not buying into any circumstance. I know today we focused a lot on emotions, but this also, like I said, applies to circumstances too, because your emotions and physical purges, they tend to be tied together, where physical purges happen at the same time as emotional purges. It's just kind of how the science of it goes. But for a lot of you, it really is just your emotions that are distracting you. It's not even the 3D that's doing anything that bad. It's just that you have emotions and you just like cannot respond differently to them. And again, responding differently means in your mind that you're just not taking them that seriously. You're still accepting them. You're not trying to suppress them or pretend like you don't have them, but you're just kind of like, whatever. It's like the barking dogs, like they'll shut up eventually. I still know that things are working out for me. So that is what I have for you today. Please let me know your thoughts and questions down in the comments below. If there's anything that you feel I need to clarify more, or just a question that you have, that's always good. Also, if you have any other requests for upcoming videos, I always love to see that from you guys. So let me know, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye.